Welcome to the Sober and Happy podcast, where we talk about all things recovery related, how to navigate the challenges that we'll face along the way on our journey towards our best lives, and how we could go from living a life of simply just being sober to a life where we're both sober and happy. Today we're discussing an important topic that everyone in addiction or recovery should be aware of: red flags that we often ignore. They may be red flags while we're still drinking that we miss until it's too late, or red flags that we ignore in our recovery that may lead us down a dangerous path. Recognizing these red flags early on can make a big difference, but how can we do that? Well, that is what we're going to be talking about today, so buckle up. This is going to be a great episode. Welcome back. When we're in active addiction, it's easy to ignore red flags. They're the warning signs that our substance use is becoming a problem. But even in recovery, there are red flags that, if ignored, could lead to setbacks or even relapse. Let's start by exploring the red flags we might see while in active addiction, and then move on to the red flags in recovery. One phrase that always hits home for me is hindsight is 20/20, and that cannot ring more true than when it comes to missing red flags that should have been glaringly obvious that my drinking was becoming a problem. From the first time I convinced myself that I was fine before getting behind the wheel after drinking too much, to making it a regular habit of killing a hangover with a couple of drinks in the morning. But not all red flags are quite as glaringly obvious as those ones. Many of them are more subtle that our drinking might be becoming a problem, but what are they? The first one to look out for is when we start rationalizing or minimizing our drinking or drug use. Often, these are the things we say to others when someone confronts us about our drinking, but the more dangerous use of this rationalization is when we're doing it with ourselves. I have used so many rationalizations and justifications over my years of drinking that I'm not going to remember them all, but here are some red flag statements that I know I personally have used. I only drink on weekends. It's just a way to unwind after a long day. I don't have to drink, but I enjoy it. I could stop whenever I want. I just don't want to right now. Life is stressful. Drinking helps me cope. I'm going through a tough time. I will cut back next month after I get through this. If I stop drinking, I'll lose all my friends. My drinking isn't hurting anyone but me. If you had been through what I've been through, you would drink like I drink too. As you could see from that list, the justifications progressed over time. As our drinking gets worse, we can't even convince ourselves with some of the early excuses, so we have to create new ones. All of them have one thing in common though, and that is our attempt to avoid looking too closely at how our substance use is impacting our lives. A good question to ask yourself is, am I making excuses for something deep down that I know isn't healthy? But in my experience, if I have to justify a behavior, that is a red flag right there. Another sign is a shift in mood or behavior. You might notice that you're quicker to anger, more withdrawn, or that you're only interested in activities involving alcohol or drugs. These changes may seem subtle initially, but over time they could affect relationships, jobs, and our overall mental health. I know I was incredibly defensive anytime someone brought up my drinking. I'd snap back, deflect the conversation, or turn it around on them. I'm not proud to say it, but I had no problem getting really dirty when doing this. My goal was to make the conversation so incredibly painful for the other person that they would think twice before criticizing my drinking again. If I had to drag up a friend's deep, dark secrets to make a point that they should be more worried about their behavior than mine, I wouldn't hesitate to do it. It got to the point that I would defend alcohol over my lifelong friends and family members. Another red flag to look out for is an increase in tolerance. There was a time when I used to get a buzz off a six-pack, then a 12-pack, and then a case. And eventually, when I would go to the store, I'd pick up a 30-pack and a bottle and know that there was a good chance that I would go back to the store later in the day. Now, by the time I got to the 30-pack and a bottle point, I knew my drinking was a problem. But I got there because I was ignoring the red flags along the way. I specifically remember my first time polishing off a 12-pack by myself at my apartment. I reached into the box in my fridge and noticed that I was grabbing the last beer, and it was still early in the evening. I didn't get concerned about my tolerance. My only thought was, how was I going to get more alcohol for the rest of the night? There was another red flag in that story too. I was only 17 years old at the time, and I was already drinking by myself. This also led me to another red flag that I was ignoring, which was hiding how much I was drinking, which is one of the motivations for me to drink alone, whether it was a whole evening drinking by myself or starting drinking before going out to make it appear as if I wasn't drinking as much as I really was. If you need to hide how much you're drinking or avoid being seen drinking, that is a red flag. This often indicates shame or guilt about drinking habits and shows that drinking is taking on a more concerning role. The last one I want to touch on for when we are still drinking is when we lose interest in non-drinking activities. People often are concerned when quitting drinking that they won't have any fun anymore, but we usually feel that way not because we can't have fun sober, but because we built our entire social life and friend group around our drinking. I know that I got tired hiding my drinking, so I tended to enjoy activities where getting drunk was socially acceptable. Parties, bars, sporting events, and concerts, just to name a few. And because I didn't want to get judged about my drinking, I also gravitated towards people who drank like I did. Eventually, I only hung out with other drunks, and we only did things where drinking was a primary focus of that activity. I didn't particularly enjoy those things or people more, they just supported my habit better. Now, when I got sober, many of those red flags became glaringly evident. However, getting sober didn't end the danger of ignoring red flags, as many in early recovery are just as dangerous to ignore. One of the first red flags that we often ignore is starting to isolate ourselves from others. We might stop going around our support group, start canceling plans, or find ourselves saying no to activities that we enjoy. When we're isolating, it could lead us right back to a mindset where relapse becomes more likely. Staying connected, even when it feels uncomfortable, is key. It is very common that whenever we start avoiding people who are supporting us, it is often because we have began entertaining thoughts of going back to drinking. Another red flag in recovery is replacing one addiction with another. This could be excessive exercise, overworking, overeating, or even spending. It may seem harmless at first, but if it's driven by the same mindset that fueled your addiction, it could lead you right back to old behaviors. Many people think that cross-addiction is a sign of something like an addictive personality, but it goes deeper than that. It is the ongoing pattern of avoidance of things left unhealed or undealt with. If you gravitate towards other unhealthy habits when you feel uncomfortable, pause and ask yourself, what are you trying to avoid? And as a side note, if you catch yourself saying this is a justification, it might not be good for me, but at least I'm not drinking. That, my friend, is a major red flag. The next one is a sneaky red flag and one that could catch you by surprise, which is romanticizing our past substance use. In recovery, it's natural to think back on the past, but if you find yourself only remembering the good old days and forgetting the harm, that's a big warning sign. Finally, one of the biggest red flags in recovery is complacency. It's easy to think, I've got this now, and stop doing the things that helped us stay sober in the beginning. Complacency is often a slow slip rather than a sudden drop, which makes it even more dangerous. Now, I'm not one of the people who will tell you that it is bad to be confident about our progress in recovery, as that is often the path to changing your identity of becoming someone who no longer drinks. However, confidence becomes overconfidence when we think we could stop doing everything that worked to get us there, and that we no longer need to continue to grow. If you kick your feet up and think, don't worry, I got this, that is where you might have crossed the threshold from genuine confidence to overconfidence, and that should send up red flag warning signs. So now that we have listed some of the more common ones, how do we stay aware of these and other red flags in recovery? The first thing is simply to remain honest with yourself. If you feel uncomfortable about a behavior or notice a change in yourself, that's a cue to look deeper. You should also check in with people you trust. Sometimes others could see things we're too close to notice. Consider having a regular check-in with a friend or family member where you both talk about any red flags you might see in each other. Finally, Don't ignore self-care routines, especially in recovery. Journaling, meditation, therapy, and exercise could keep you grounded and help you notice any early warning signs before they become significant problems. If you're listening to this episode, whether you're in active addiction or in recovery, I hope you take these red flags to heart. Awareness is power, and the sooner you recognize these signs, the sooner you could take action to address them. As we close, I want to leave you with a challenge. Take 10 minutes today to reflect on your life and write down any red flags you might have ignored. Are you minimizing certain behaviors, isolating, or replacing one addiction with another? This is your chance to raise awareness of areas that might need your attention. Every small step you take to acknowledging these red flags brings you closer to a healthier, more fulfilling life. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you are, please do me a favor and grab your phone and text one person who you think might benefit from listening to this episode. That would mean the world to me. New episodes come out each Friday, so I look forward to connecting with you next week. And as always, thank you so much for listening and keep living sober and happy.